Good afternoon, and welcome to Nourishment at Noon. I'm David Magnitsky, one of the pastors at Manchac United Methodist Church. It's my privilege to be with you on Mondays and Wednesdays to share with you. And I'm real privileged to be here on Memorial Day to share with you. And I've brought with me an assistant. Some of you will recognize this as a bobblehead of Mike Krzyzewski, who is the coach of Duke University basketball team. You may wonder what that has to do with anything on Memorial Day. Well, Coach Krzyzewski is a graduate of West Point, the United States Military Academy. And so I think it'd be a good idea on Memorial Day to share with you, as I've been sharing all month about people who have influenced me, both from a distance and up close. I want to share with you about 3 men with military backgrounds who made an impression on my life. And so with Coach K's permission, I'll go forward. Coach K, do you agree that's a good idea to talk about that? Yes, he does. So thank you. Well, I'd like to talk on this Memorial Day, as I said, about 3 very important men that I knew up close and personally who had military background and made a difference in my life. The first one I'd like to talk with you about is my father, Adam Magnitsky. My father was a doctor in the United States Navy for a number of years, and then eventually resigned his commission. So full disclosure, he did not retire from the military, but he resigned in part so he could move his family, of which I was an elementary student at the time and a part of that family, back to his home state of Texas. And I certainly think we can't doubt his patriotism with an excellent reason like that. As I think about my dad, even though he was in the military, he was not a disciplinarian when it came to the way he raised me. In fact, he raised me with a great deal of personal freedom. In fact, I never knew I had a curfew growing up until I came in at 2 in the morning one late Friday night, early Saturday morning, and found out from him that that was a little late to be coming in. Like many other parents, he reminded me that nothing good happens after midnight. He also, even though he had spent a number of years in the military, gave me the freedom to grow my hair as long as I wanted. Now, I didn't appreciate it at the time, but now looking back, I'm glad that I was able to take brief advantage of that opportunity. So my dad wasn't particularly strict, and gave me a great deal of freedom. It does remind me of Coach K, who says that when he coaches basketball, he has very few rules for his team. He said, rules are for people who don't want to make decisions. But if you want to grow up and mature, you have to make decisions on your own. So the fewer rules, normally, the better. And so my dad didn't have a lot. I did learn his expectation was that I would always do the best that I could. I learned from him that good enough was rarely, if ever, good enough, that I had to go the extra mile, as I saw in him, to get things the best that they could possibly be. He had a strong work ethic. In fact, I would say, like many physicians of his day, my dad was really a workaholic. But the positive part about that is he taught me the importance of work and the value of always doing things to the best of your ability. Another thing I learned from my dad, I hope, was a sense of humor. My dad was often happy, often joking about things, and I've heard it said that humor is a sure sign that someone understands the grace of God, because they can take life seriously but not take themselves so seriously. And I saw that in my dad. But the most important thing I saw was in his later years, I watched my dad, weakened from back surgeries and certainly age, continue to care for my mother, who had Alzheimer's and really wasn't diagnosed very early, but looking back, we can see that it was a fairly early onset for my mom. But my dad waited on her and watched over and dedicated himself to her well-being. Eventually, they had to move into assisted living so that they could stay together with her great needs. And so my dad, since mom had her days days and nights mixed up, went often without sleep, but nevertheless was always there. When my mom died and then my dad died a few years later, the people at that retirement home, and it was run by the Sisters of the Incarnate Word, so they don't use this term loosely. The people that in retirement home called my dad a saint, and I learned so much about loyalty and marriage and life from him. I'd also like to share with you that later in my life, I came under the influence of two retired generals in my congregation at my last church. One was a retired 2-star general from the Air Force. His name was David. The other was a retired 3-star general from the Army. His name was Tom. And I used to spend a great deal of time with them because I learned so much about life and leadership from them, and I enjoyed being in their company. One year in the spring, we did a sermon series on the book of Joshua. So I would interview them on video about certain military things. And so I'd be in a room surrounded by the 2-star and the 3-star general. And some people, interestingly, maybe even snarkily remarked that if you looked up on that video screen, between those 3 people, there were 5 stars. It's true, I didn't have a star, I wasn't a general. I might not have belonged in that conversation, but I sure enjoyed it. And I want to remind you that the very first hero that we started with in the month of May was Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain. You might remember his military training consisted of a degree from a seminary. And then Doris Kearns Goodwin reminds us that Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the commander-in-chief of all of our armies in World War II, delighted in hosting people aboard the presidential yacht, and on Sunday mornings he insisted on leading the worship service. So there's sort of that theologian military mix that sometimes comes to light. As I think about these 2 generals, they taught me 4 very significant things, not unlike what my dad taught me. The first thing they taught me was again about a sense of humor. David, my Air Force friend, had an amazing sense of humor and joy about life. Still has it to this day. And to hear him singing or laughing or whistling coming down the hall was a delight to all of us. He loved to tell jokes. A lot of them are pretty corny, but the great thing was watching him crack up before he got to the punchline. Tom, in the same way, had a sense of humor and humility that I think comes with a sense of humor, that is evidence of a sense of humor as well. Tom's humility was such that I would send people to him, other pastors included, to be mentored, and I would warn them. I would say, now, when you call Tom, he's going to tell you, I've been retired from the Army for a number of years, and I really don't know anything anymore. And I would say, after Tom gives you that speech, get your pen out and write down everything he tells you from that point on. So I saw great humility in both David and Tom. Another thing I saw in them was they taught me that leadership was not even about what you accomplished personally or even what your organization accomplished, but leadership had to do with the well-being of those who were under your leadership. You could tell they cared deeply about their troops. And both of them, when I asked them who their hero was, named the same general, General Cavazos, well known for his care and support of his troops. And so it reminded me that kings, fathers and mothers, presidents of organizations, CEOs, pastors, we're all measured by how well the people under our leadership are doing. A third thing they both taught me was the importance of family. And they really showed me that I had an advantage, that I could carry out my mission and calling and still have my family with them. Both of them spent far too much time away from their family and their military duties to what they would have preferred. But I saw in them an intense appreciation for what their families, including their spouses, had to sacrifice. And I saw a dedication to continue to their spouses and families and their retirement. So it reminded me that one advantage of being a pastor over being a military general is I often can be with my family as I carry out this work, and I need to take advantage of that. Fourth thing that I saw in both of them was, even though they were leaders, they were very supportive of whoever had been placed in leadership and above them. In other words, they taught me that leaders are very good followers. And they both saw me in the church and theological realm as their leader, and their loyalty and support of me was nothing short of life-saving. I remember David, the retired Air Force general, one time set up a system as he came on to our church as the chief of staff, where every complaint about the church went through him before it ever got to me. And as you can imagine, being a church where I'm the pastor, there were a lot of complaints, but he took them and handled most all of them himself, and that had to take a toll on him. From a position of a layperson sitting in a pew, Tom, my retired Army general friend, would also demonstrate great support and loyalty to me. I remember one time there were some disgruntled people about a decision I'd made in the church, and they felt I hadn't not only done it properly or done the right thing, I hadn't consulted them. And so they caught him coming into church to share with them their complaint. And Tom told me afterwards, he said, my response to them was, when I was a general, I was not in the habit of consulting privates before I made an important decision. And then he smiled at me and he looked and he said, I wouldn't give it another thought. Go on and go forward. Their support and encouragement me kept me going. Finally, each of them made a distinctive contribution that continues to help me to this day. David, the retired Air Force general, made an important contribution by his vulnerability that he demonstrated in life. He was an authentic and vulnerable and real person and wasn't afraid to hide his feelings and his shortcomings. So one day in 2004, I woke up, and for the first time in almost 25 years of ministry, I didn't want to go to work. I didn't want to go to that church. I didn't want to go to any church. But who do you tell? If you tell the staff, they're worried because the staff in many ways is dependent upon the health of the senior pastor for their livelihood. And how do you tell lay people, oh, your pastor really doesn't want to help connect you with God anymore? And so the only person I felt safe going to because of his vulnerability was David. And he listened to me carefully and with great wisdom. He made sure that I was checked, that I didn't have a clinical depression. And then he worked with me, listened to me, took me seriously. We set up a system of changing the way we did things that helped me regain my energy and vitality. And I would say because of David, I have gained the last 15 years in ministry, and maybe, who knows, I'll end up with another 4 or 5 more. Again, if you want to thank him, his name is David. If you want to curse him, his name is David. And Tom's particular contribution to me was very surprising at the time he made the contribution. He convinced me that a major part of my job as a senior pastor of a church was not having an effective organization, was not even preaching the gospel faithfully. Both of those are important. But he said, your main job is to find and develop the leaders who are coming under you. Find the next generation of leaders and release them into service. And so that has been, for many years now, a major part of who I am pre-pandemic. And what I do is to counsel and support pastors, people interested in becoming pastors, lay people who hear a calling to greater service in the church. I'm looking for them and ways to support them. And that has, more than anything else, defined my last 15 years of ministry that David's intervention helped give to me. So to my dad, to David, to Tom, I appreciate your service in the military, but I'm so glad that you did not die in that service, but that you lived, and that your life has made such an impact on mine. And to the rest of you, have a great Memorial Day. I have a great surprise for you on Wednesday. I will be here. Chanson will be pinch hitting for me. I know you'll be looking forward to that. Of course, Mark Hickson is tomorrow, Kim is Thursday, and Chanson is back on Friday. God bless you this week ahead.